Welcome to the Bonsai Time Podcast, the monthly Everything Bonsai and More podcast. In today's episode, we will hear a conversation that I, your host, Kevin, had with Jim Doyle, the bonsai professional and owner of Nature's Way Nursery, which is located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. In this conversation, Jim discusses his time in bonsai, how he came to sell bonsai at his nursery, his approach to the art and lifestyle of bonsai, and how he teaches bonsai to his students. Jim also discusses his time with Walter Pall and his involvement with Jennifer Price's apprenticeship. With the help and influence from his good friend Chase Rosade, Jim has been practicing bonsai full-time since 1980. Have a listen and bonsai on! Alright, we're starting. Beautiful weather today. The trees aren't out yet, I noticed. The winter's still hanging on by its fingernails. Yeah. As you guys got snow too on Saturday?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
About 2 inches.
Yeah.
There's some northern pockets. There's a little bit yet.
Yeah, driving through. I didn't realize how long Pennsylvania is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was like...
Yeah, if you go Philly to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, driving to Chase's from Columbus.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
You did do
right there.
length.
And I was like, it was...
Yeah, you were at the river.
It was a good jaunt.
And you'll go through... Not through Pittsburgh, but... Yeah, so you'll do the whole state.
Yeah, so, I got to see a lot of wonderful trees and stuff. And, I always asked...
Where else did you go?
Just drove through. So, went to Chase's, went around New Hope, Doylestown, all that. Told me a lot of history and stuff. Last night we were talking, and I was helping him out with trees, repotting and whatnot. And, I asked about how he met you. But before we go to that question, what's your first memory of a tree?
What's my first memory of a tree?
Or what do you think of when you think of a tree?
Well, I ask my students that a lot, especially before meditations and bonsai, and to pick a tree in their life that impacted them. They have a memory of it, something they admired, a romantic spot. This is something that triggered a memory of a tree. And I think there's a lot of trees in my life, and I climbed, but the tree I remember the most and still look forward to seeing is an old pear tree on our family farm in Oswego, New York. And that tree is still around. It was planted probably by my great-grandfather over 100 years ago.
Wow.
It still bears fruit. It's got a lot of holes in it. It's all by itself now. It used to be in an orchard of pear trees. A quick story, my grandfather at 94 fell out of a pear tree harvesting pears, broke his hip, and he stopped farming that day. And for 2 years he just sat around, and farming was his life. But this particular pear tree is something that I actually go to see before I went to see my grandparents and my uncle.
Oh, okay.
Go visit, go into the, we'd pull up the driveway and get out of the car, and I would go to the tree. So I've known the tree all my life, and I've eaten pears. I've watched snakes live in it, and I just saw that it's a survivor, and so I really admire that tree. It's not the most beautiful tree in the world. It's one about beauty, but it's one of my most memorable trees.
It holds space for you, in more ways than one.
Yes.
That's really cool. So you were born in New York, or?
No, I was born here in Harrisburg. Lived here all my life. I've traveled a lot through bonsai and other things, but I always enjoy coming back to where I live. I think this area is a good area for economics, for beauty, natural beauty, change in seasons. The cultural givings of the area are great. It's like a hub. We're between Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Washington, D.C., Baltimore. We're kind of in a hub, and so that's been good as far as our lifestyle, with bonsai.
Right, yeah. So going for that time traveling and whatnot, you were into bonsai early on, or was school, because you went to horticulture school, is that right? Or for
I went to Delaware Valley University, same as Chase Rosade.
That's what you're saying.
And I did not know him at the time, and I didn't know bonsai at the time that I was going to college. But I was in pre-veterinarian, and I switched my major my sophomore year, middle of my sophomore year, to horticulture. My grades weren't good enough to get into vet school. I partied too much, and so you need almost a straight A average, and mine was a low B.
Right.
So I got realistic and changed my dream. And I thought with horticulture, which in Del Valle is fruits and vegetables, I could always go back to farming and help my uncle up in New York and so on. So I decided to switch my major, and while I was at college, I had a part-time job at a nursery, and I had a lot of time to think when I was digging trees and pruning and so on. So I thought this I wouldn't mind doing. It's physical, it's mentally challenging. I learn something new every day, and working with trees and being outside. So I started getting more interested in ornamental horticulture than horticulture. And so I talked a college buddy of mine into going into business in 1973.
And that's when starting this nursery here?
That's when Nature's Way started.
Yeah.
It's the last time I shaved my beard. It's the last time I ate meat. So I became a vegetarian at 49 years ago. And
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah. And that's the time I met Chase. It was 1 week after graduated from college, and I was going to I read about him. I went to a program about bonsai, just to chop it up, throw it in a pot, and say it's going to live.
Yeah.
And then I started reading on it, and I found out Chase Rosade, which was only 7 miles from Del Valle, was there all the time. Never knew it. So I called him up, and I saw him in the morning, and he said, "Well, I'm working, so you're just going to have to follow me, and if your question's fine." And he actually had me helping him prune a Japanese maple. He was teaching me how to prune a Japanese maple. Was part of the discussion, and then I was with him just a few hours in the morning, and then in the afternoon I went to see my friend that was in college. He got a new job at Bartlett Tree Service. And that afternoon I was in a 70-foot maple tree learning how to prune with ropes and everything.
Right.
So that was an eye-opening day, and it put everything into context that, a tree, it's 3 feet, and we'll say 50 years old, and a tree that's 70 feet and 50 years old, and it's all through its life. One tree was in a pot all its life, and the other tree's been in the ground all its life.
Right, the perspective.
So it's quite a perspective, and that was the day it really said, I want to learn more about both. So I was a tree climber for a while, and part of the landscaping, and I started my bonsai interest very seriously that day.
So just you got the bug and became infected, so to speak, and just went off from there.
I came home, and I had land that I was allowed to use. It was 140 acres, and I had 7 acres of it under production, mostly dwarf conifers and Japanese maples.
And that was for the nursery?
That's for the nursery in the ground. And I went up to the nursery and just found a pine tree growing somewhere, and that was my first bonsai. I dug it up, put it in a pot, and I started styling the tree.
You still have it today?
I still have it today.
Wow.
It's dead, but I still have it.
The memory is still there.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you got into it for personal artistic creation, right?
Yes.
Getting to know Chase more, becoming kind of a contemporary, or in the essence a teacher-student?
Yeah, I never... and Chase always has said, he never considered me a student. But if you learn something from somebody, that's partially a student in my mind.
Right.
And I sought Chase out. I went to see him when he was doing demonstrations, and I'd observe some of the workshops he taught because I couldn't afford to take workshops and things like that. But any opportunity I had to see him and some other people, but especially Chase in the beginning, I did. And then years later, our paths kept crossing, and he was part of a study group, a bonsai study group with all these well-known people in the bonsai world, and they asked me to be part of their study group, and I was really...
Was it the Bonsai Camp or whatever they called it?
No, it was called the Delaware Valley Study Group.
Okay.
DVSG.
Okay.
And Chase had started it, and he had the likes of friends of his throughout the world, but especially John Naca would come, and people would come and teach us, and we were all sharing off of each other ideas, and we would pick subjects each time that we met and really study it, research it. And if you were hosting, you even researched it more. And so the acceleration of my knowledge really got in a higher gear.
Right.
And I was so honored to be part of this group. And I was the youngest one at one time, believe it or not. And we kind of, from COVID, had to disband. So it's no longer...
So that's been going on for quite a few years.
A long time, yeah. Probably 50, 60 years.
Wow.
Yeah, because I wasn't part of it right off the bat.
Right.
And this is my 49th year.
Do you have any thoughts of starting it back up or trying to?
Maybe a hybrid of it. And the thought is because people are spread out and time restraints and everything, and so I thought of possibly starting with some friends a study group just in our geographic area.
Right.
Maybe just 5 or 6. Yeah.
That'd be nice.
That would do that, but right now it's just a thought. It's not.
Nothing. No application on it. So you met John the first time at that study group, John Naca, and then...
No, not there, but I met John in Philadelphia at Fairmount Park. He was doing a demonstration, and it was through the Pennsylvania Bonsai Society. And anyways, these silly demos they auction off or raffle off. So anyways, we bought some raffle tickets. We weren't members of the Pennsylvania Bonsai Society, but we bought some raffle tickets, and lo and behold, my wife won it. Mary Kay won the raffle. Everybody was kind of upset that an outsider won a Naca tree. And back then, I was just into it, so I didn't really understand how to care for it as much as I should have. So it passed on, but it could have been also just because of demo trees. You do more to them than you should.
Yeah.
So we don't know the real reason there.
The crowd-pleasing appeal as it goes.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject.
yeah, we could spend an hour just on that.
Yeah, maybe someday. But so then, how did you get acquainted with like Bill Valvanis, and you met Yuji Yoshimura before? Mm-hmm. How did those come about? Because that's in this general area too. It's not a stone's throw, but down the river. So
well, Yuji, I first met at I sought him out. He was lecturing at the New York Botanical Garden in the Bronx, and he was talking on Japanese garden design, and it was an all-day 3-person program, and Yuji was one of the 3 to talk on Japanese garden design. So, and I was very much into that Japanese garden design, and so anyways, I went there for the day and learned so much from him, and I talked to him a little bit afterwards, and then we parted our ways, and then I met Bill Valvanis through going to see him in upstate New York, out in the country, and I drove my little pickup with my dog. Her name was Life, so Life and I went up and went to this like weekend event at a small nursery somewhere in the Catskills, and I saw Bill there do programs, and at that time he was traveling with his mother, and so anyways, he had this little booklet that he wrote, and so I bought one, and I wanted to go up and have his autograph with it, and I was so excited to meet him, and he was busy with other people and all, and his mother wouldn't let me meet him.
Really?
I wasn't.
You weren't allowed
one of the
to.
higher echelon
Of
the time, so she
no name.
now
look at you.
she wouldn't let me meet him, so I never got the book signed.
Huh.
Not that day.
I was gonna say.
But I never got the book signed, and so we started just crossing paths, and he had this wonderful symposium up in New York every year at Rochester, and I would go up as a vendor eventually in the late 1980s, 1990s, and then he started asking me to teach, which was very exciting for me to do programs for the weekend. So I was one of the guest artists there, and so I would have him come down here to teach at our club. We started a club 40-some years ago, myself and a friend, Susquehanna Bonsai Club, and that's still going strong. And so once in a while Bill would come down here and teach with our club. So we became good friends. We're the same age. We've traveled together through the States and roomed together, and traveled in Japan some, and so we've hung out a lot together over the years. And so he's a good friend, and hopefully it's mutual. He taught me a lot. I taught him some things too.
Always an experience, right?
So yeah, it's been a good experience.
Nice. Within your time going back just a bit, starting the nursery, when did you start selling bonsai? When did that come about?
That's a good question. In the beginning, I was just doing it by myself. It was a hobby. It wasn't a lifestyle like now, but it was a hobby. And I was trying to learn, but it was expensive, like a lot of things that I just couldn't afford. I was starting a family, and so I was very economical with my trees and all. And then in about the early 1980s, probably 82, 83, I went to a symposium just on a Sunday morning. I only could afford to go to watch 2 programs from 9 to noon at a Potomac Bonsai event down in Maryland. So I went there, and I learned so much in those couple hours, and then I had $50 that I went into the vending room, and I bought myself a turntable and a tool. And so while I was in the vending room, I was asking one of the vendors, I said, well, how's this work? I said, how do you become a vendor? And they said, well, you pay them a fee and you bring your stuff and you try to sell it. And I said, well, that's cool, but I said, can you go to the programs? And they said, yeah, part of the vending, most shows, part of the vending fee is you get a free pass to go to the lectures. But he said, if you go to the lectures, you're not selling stuff. So anyways, the wheels started turning, and I thought, okay, I can increase my education by becoming a vendor, and if I just break even, I get my education for free. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. So I started growing trees. Getting back to your question, I started growing trees for bonsai to resell, and I thought in the beginning I would only sell trees that I styled, nobody else's, just my own. Okay. So I had about 40 trees set up for sale, and I became a vendor at one of the largest world shows in Potomac, and to this day I think Chase got me in, but he doesn't remember. Right. I think from him recommending me, because you had to be recommended. It was all the big league people. Right. So the very first show, I had my daughter there. She was like maybe 6 months old, 8 months old. Okay. And I brought a crib, or not a crib, but a place set, and we put that behind our blending booth. So I had a real nursery at a nursery show, and I put my plants in a few pots and tools that I assembled. This was 1986, and I put them out, and I sold all the trees that I styled pretty quickly.
Very nice.
And then
So
I had
feel
to
pretty
realize, I had to realize, I got to do something else. So, anyways, Mr. Ishii was right next to me, him and his wife, and they were probably in their 70s then, 60s, 70s, and they brought, they were from California, and they had all their trees shipped to them. And this is before the show started. And all of a sudden their boxes come from California, and they're opening them up, and then all of a sudden people were flocking at their table. Now this is right next to us, and they were flocking at their table. And I'm, what's going on? And talked to my wife, and I said, I got to go see what's happening here. And as early as Mr. Ishii could get a tree out of the box, and they were still wrapped. The pots were wrapped, so you couldn't see the pot or even the style of the tree. He'd put them on the table, and somebody would grab it.
Wow!
And he was, before the show started, he sold 90% of his trees. So, anyways, while this was happening, I thought, okay, I'm going to do it too. So I grabbed one of his trees and looked at the price, and I put it back, and then I grabbed another one, and I can afford this one. So I bought like 2 of his trees, and I watched him. So the next 3 days they didn't have anything to sell because he sold out. So I learned a lot just from that event. That if you do something well, you're going to be successful,
and well known,
so to speak, and well known.
Yeah.
So we got to know Mr. Ishii very well because he had nothing to do, and he was playing with our daughter, and his wife, and so we got to know each other real well and became friends over the years. And right across from us was Roy Nagatoshi, and he came in with 6 trees. That's all, 6 trees.
Oh wow!
But at the time, they were thousands of dollars.
I was going to ask the price because my 6 trees.
All 6 were sold very quickly. So from Mr. Ishii's trees that were $25 to say $300, Roy Nagatoshi's trees were maybe $1,000 to $5,000. Now this is back in 1980s.
Right.
And he sold his 6 trees pretty quickly. So he actually made more than the Ishiis because of the dollar value. So,
that's quite a learning experience.
So the wheels started turning. And so I started seeking out more symposiums that I could get accepted in as a vendor. So I was known as a vendor first and not a teacher. But it accelerated my knowledge. And then eventually I got asked to teach and do workshops and so on. And then I started having, and Chase was one of the first guest artists to come to Nature's Way to teach. Back in the 1980s also. So he was actually the first guest artist for our club in Susquehanna Bonsai Club back in the 80s also.
Oh, wow.
So there's brief history.
I was going to say right
just
there.
That one little period of time.
With your travels and whatnot, and your inclination to take on some apprentices and things, within the travel, how did you go to meet Walter Pall? Then how did you interpret or apply the, hey, I have Jennifer Price, was your, I believe, a student of yours?
Yes.
Correct? And then how did that go from getting to Walter, and then how did you meet Walter in that way?
Okay. All right. Well, I met a lot of people.
Right.
Okay, over the years. Before the talk on Walter, 1984, I told my wife, Mary Kay, I said, I got to go to Japan. It's just, before we start a family, I have to go to Japan.
Right.
I said, if we start a family, then
Never
we're not going to be able to it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So she said yes, and her and I, with the help of Chase and Bill Valavenis, they gave me their business cards, and I had some kind of introductions to see the best at the time in Japan.
Wow, that's really cool.
And they either wrote ahead or just wrote something on their card that would allow me to talk to the big names at the time.
The secret password kind of deal.
Yeah. And so we went for 3 weeks with 2 backpack each. We knew where the first night and the last night we were going to stay, and everything else in between we made up. So we got a rail pass and traveled through Japan, and if we liked the area, we stayed longer, and if we didn't, we moved on.
Right.
And we stayed at ryokans, which are Japanese inns.
Mm-hmm.
Very expensive today, but back then they were very cheap. So we had a $20 a day budget for sleeping arrangements, and we had a $20 a day for the 2 of us budget for food. And we did quite well, and we only went over budget once
nice.
with the place but we stayed at inns, except for 3 nights we stayed at a hotel because we couldn't find an inn.
Right.
But one innkeeper would say, "Oh, you're going to Kyoto. Okay, I know a friend that has a inn in Kyoto. I'll call them up." They call them up. They say, "Yeah, we'll have a room for you. We'll see you tonight." And they wrote down the address in Japanese. We get out of the train station and show it to anybody,
right.
And they would take us
to
the inn or give us directions. And so we got through Japan, all that. I was there to study bonsai, study the Japanese gardens, and maybe set up an import of Japanese lanterns, granite lanterns, but they were too expensive and I couldn't do that. So anyways, bought a few items, brought them back, and then eventually I sold a few at shows because something from Japan,
right? That's a hot commodity.
Treasured, hot commodity. So that helped the vending part in the future. And so anyways, while we were in Japan, we decided to start trying to make a baby. So,
okay, nice.
Yeah, so we could tell them they were made in Japan. And it didn't happen, but 2 years later we got blessed with our daughter. So,
nice.
So anyways, with Walter, I met him in 1992, and I and George Gracie that started the Susquehanna Bonsai Club, we were the chairman for the ABS, American Bonsai Society Symposium that year, which was held in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So George and I picked out the hotel. We went to like 6 hotels, picked out this hotel, and here comes Chase again. We were trying to figure out who to ask. Okay, so we had Von Banning, Doris Froning, Jack Billett, Susumu Sudo, and some other people I don't remember right now, but we decided to ask Chase if we wanted to have somebody. My idea was to get somebody from Europe, so I asked Chase. I said, "You travel a lot. Who in Europe should we ask?" And he said, "Well, I was just in French Riviera, and I saw this bonsai show, and this one tree really struck me, and it was in a pedestal that you could walk around it, and the tree was nice the whole way around it." And he said some newbie called Walter Pall designed the tree.
Right.
And he said, "Why don't you call him? I would recommend him." So through Chase's recommendation, we wrote Walter, and Walter was never in the United States except to study in Colorado. He went to college there, but he was never in the United States for bonsai.
Right.
He was just, a hobbyist.
Yeah.
So we asked him, and he writes back, and he accepted, and he started writing more, and he says, "I want this, I want the certain projector, and I want to have it at certain angles, and I want a good demo tree, and I want this and that." And everybody's, at the meetings are starting to say, "This guy's going to be a pain in the ass. This guy's going to be, very demanding." So we're sitting around, everybody's looking at me, and I said, "Okay, I'm in charge of Walter. I'll take Walter, and I'll make sure he gets what he wants."
Right.
So I meet Walter, and the first night, and Andy Smith, he's a collector, in South Dakota, and he wrote us and sent us some really bad photos of trees he was collecting. And during our meetings of who we were going to have for vendors, I said, well, this is kind of a gamble, but why not? Let's ask this guy with these collected trees to come. So Andy comes in a pickup and a trailer, and we're helping unload the trees. And they were pretty cool, different types of juniper and pines, and they're pretty cool trees. And so anyways, he left a couple trees in the back of the van, and said, Andy, why don't we go unload these too? And he said, no, that big tree. And I was looking at this one tree, and he said, that one's sold already. It's sold. And then as soon as we're finishing up the conversation, Walter comes. And this was late at night. This was like at 9 or 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And Andy's pulling up. And Walter comes and looks at the tree, and he said, that's my demo tree. And Andy says, I'm sorry, but it's sold. And he said, no, it's my demo tree.
Wow.
And he said, and I said to him, I said, well, if we were to buy this tree, how much would it be? And it was way over our budget. Way over. So Walter's here. It's still my demo tree. So I'm here. What's going on? What the hell's going on? So anyways, he says to Andy, or he says to me and Andy together, he says, I'm going to pay, what's your budget? And I'll just say $500.
Right.
And how much is the tree? Well, it's $1,000. Okay. I'm going to pay the other $500. I'm going to guarantee you get your $1,000.
Right.
The club.
Right.
And when you auction it off, it's going to go for way more than that anyway.
Oh, wow.
He said, if it does, then I don't owe you $500. I owe you nothing, So
that's a
He
gamble.
said, then he turns to Andy. He says, I'm going to make you famous. And Andy said, what? And he said, I'm going to put you on stage to talk about that tree. And you're going to have like 10 minutes to say whatever you want about the tree. You could talk about your trees in your vending booth, whatever you want to say.
Wow.
You can say it on stage in front of 200 people, one time. He says, you're going to be famous. So Andy agreed. And so Larry Jackal was there from Colorado.
And he was a collector too, right?
He's a collector. He's a good friend of mine. And so he and I actually worked the tree. Walter, as always, talks, and he doesn't do. And so anyways, he cut a couple branches, and then he said, wire the tree, and then he'll position the branches. And
he's a conductor of the orchestra.
He's a conductor, yeah. So he yacked away with his slides, which were very good. The program went very well, and the tree turned out great. And actually, I had a little lesson with Larry, because we're standing there together wiring, and Larry knows all about collected trees and pond. Larry could have been doing that program, especially about the culture part. And so anyways, Andy got up, did his talk. Walter got a good slide program. And he did a couple things through the weekend. He didn't just do one thing, and he taught workshops and so on. And then so it comes to banquet time. They roll the trees out for auction, and sure enough, that tree went for way more than we paid for it.
And he's like, son of a gun.
Walter was pretty excited about that. So
he didn't owe any money.
Yeah, he didn't owe us money, and we owed him. So anyways, it was a great success, and I learned a lot just to be... you got to be the best you can be on stage. And this was his first opportunity to be a program highlight, which he was. So the end of the show on Sunday, he comes along, and people are coming up, like lots of people. So when are you having Walter back? When's Walter coming back? And
just like that. Wow.
Just like that. And I said, well, I don't know. I said, we haven't talked about that. And they said, well, I want him for our club, and I want him for this club and that club. And before I knew it, I had a tour set up for 3 weeks, just Walter and I. But I was mainly his driver and assistant in the very beginning. And, it was the Walter Pall show. So, we, have it all set up, and I planned out the tour so we wouldn't backtrack. So we went down south and then came up in 3 weeks. And so anyways, we got done with the tour. I said, this is great. He flew home. Phone rings. We want him back next year. Everybody's calling back.
Wow.
So I called Walter up and said, for some reason they want you back again. And I said, "What? Are you up for it?" And he said, "Sure." So before we knew it, we were doing tours together. But the second tour, I started doing a tree alongside him instead of me wiring his tree and he's talking all the time. We started becoming friends, and he said, "Oh, you know what you're doing." And so and he always asked my advice at the end of his styling, and then I would give him little tweaks. And he said, "This guy's an artist." I knew he was, but he doesn't talk much. You know? So anyways, we started doing that. Before we knew it, we had run up over 20,000 miles together on the road.
Wow.
And so we came up with lots of ideas and things to do. And then he said, well, maybe you should be coming to Europe and doing what I do in Europe. So he set me up with tours in Europe, and he drove me around.
Oh, wow.
So the roles were reversed.
Yeah.
And the first one was 3 days after 9/11. I went to Belgium for the Jackal Cup, and we did a program together there. And then he took me to nurseries and hobbyists and everything, and I was teaching at like bonsai garden centers and things like that through Germany mostly, and we also started collecting together. So it was a wonderful experience. So I started doing that, and he continued coming here. And then
did you meet Randy Knight in the middle of this?
no, not yet.
Okay.
And then I was doing the Rendezvous in Memphis, and I think the year before I met this young woman that walked like a duck, and she was walking around in Chicago Botanic Garden while I was vending and teaching there in August, and she was walking around with this older guy, and she kept coming back to the booth and asking questions and all, and then she bought a tree or something, and then she moved on with apparently one of her first teachers. And then the next year or two, I was teaching at Memphis, and she was taking a workshop with Mark Nolanders, and I think she signed up for one of my workshops. And anyways, she started taking the workshop, and I saw that she was really into it, and she was good. She picked up on things pretty quickly, and I had to make that judgment just in 3 hours. And anyways, I think she turned out she canceled Mark's next workshop and took mine.
Oh, wow.
A second one. And then, so that's how I met Jennifer Price. And then sometime later, could be years later, I don't remember the time frame, I introduced her to Walter.
Okay.
And so after Mary Kay died, I decided I needed a Walter fix, and I was going to go to Europe to see him, and I invited Jennifer to go with me.
Very cool.
So I said, if you're serious about this, and I was at that time I was starting to teach her a little bit in Chicago mostly, and I said, if you're serious about this, why don't you go to Europe and see real trees? And Walter's a great guide. He'll take us places you'll just be blown away.
Right.
And so the whole trip was geared. I had her sit in the front seat, and we put on 1,000 more miles.
Right.
And or more.
Right.
And so she saw things that I was not taking for granted anymore. But she saw the Dolomites and all the beautiful beauty of northern Italy and Croatia and Germany, of course, Austria. So she went to see friends, and we went into Czech Republic and bought some pots. And then we went into Poland and saw Maros Folda and Igor Barta. And so she got to see real bonsai for the first time, especially the collected trees and where they come from,
right,
and so on. So it really opened her eyes. So she wanted to learn even more. And so Walter and I were both kind of teaching her, and he took her under his wing and then she goes back now to Germany and
oh wow,
assists him and works on trees and so on. So
cool.
So that was the beginning. I don't remember the year, but
right.
That was the beginning of how they met. Now if you ask Walter,
yeah.
He introduced Jennifer to me. But
as you said, Walter,
he always has his own version of things. Some of them are real, some are not so real.
With your time in American bonsai and traveling the world, what has been, in your opinion, from since the 70s with Chase as a guiding light, if I can say that, out of respect for both of you, what do you think has made it work, and then to where it's now? What would you say has shaped it? Because as we were talking just now, you said you went to Italy and saw all these collected trees. Back in the day, it was a lot of imported, or even like, why would I want to work on a Rocky Mountain juniper? Why would I want to, do these things? It has no flavor, if you will. When within your time, what are some things that you could think of made it work?
Well, there's a lot. It's not one thing. So It is a combination of things. And Walter and I think, hit it off well together. The guy, said, well, we traveled over 30,000 miles together and we're still friends.
Right.
And because we love, we love trees. And he said, and Walter always said, it's because of my uncompromising way. But Walter and I came up with a lot of good ideas. We're brothers in bonsai, and we saw a lot. And we also, I think the main thread was we both admire and believe in naturalistic design. And I've had, and probably Walter too, have had people walk out on us when we were doing a program because we weren't preaching the gospel of Japanese design.
Yeah. Left, right.
And that's changed tremendously now. Now people actually pay to see us to talk about them instead of walking out. But anyways, that thread really kept us together, and our love of nature and trees, and sharing it and finding a tree that you can legally collect out of a mountain and bring down and eventually nurture it and develop it as a bonsai and a piece of art is quite rewarding. So that was part of it. But the other part, I think, it's always economics in it, but buying a tree from Japan that's already pre-styled, pre-bonsai, but pretty much there, and you just do the refinement. And that's what Japanese are really good at, is refinement. They're some of the best. And those trees, and I imported for a long time, since 1993. I was importing trees and from Japan and China. And that kind of dried up through laws and insect problems. Longhorn beetle changed a lot about bonsai pretty quickly. And so the availability of trees from Japan was getting less and less. And so people had to either buy other people's trees that were from Japan to keep this going, or style some trees that they could grow from propagators, things like that. But that was even difficult. So they said, oh, what's in our backyard? Oh, here's some cool winged elms, or here's some wild cherry trees, or lodgepole pine and limber pine and ponderosa pines and all those trees. Yeah, there's Mr. Andy Smith. He's collecting all these trees. Let's buy some from him.
Right, as you said, yeah.
And other people. And so the love affair of bonsai was still strong, or even stronger, but it was with different plant material because of many factors of availability
accessibility too, and price.
And price and so on. So,
yeah.
So that was probably some of the main parts of a transition in design.
Yeah.
And it's still going. And if it gets stagnant or it becomes the same thing all the time, that's not art anymore. That's a craft.
Yeah.
And when you go to a nursery in Japan and you look at 500 Shimpaku juniper, 15 to 18 inches tall, Miyogi style, you look at 500, 498 of them look the same.
Right.
And the two that don't, those are the ones I'm usually attracted to.
Right.
And
not production.
I go to Japan a lot, and I go to these big shows and go through the shows, and I study the trees, and I'm enamored with them, and I'm still very much inspired with them, but it's not my taste in design.
Right. It seems to be that from what I've picked up on talking to people or just meeting friends online or here from around the world, what have you, that many countries go through that process. I know Europe's been a little more developed from what I understand now.
Yes.
Spain, Australia's getting their game going on strong. Latin America, Mexico.
Yeah. New Zealand.
Yeah, I've been here a lot from New Zealand.
Ireland.
England and all there too. Just in this essence of Chase and I were discussing this, and said every country has their own style, personality in their tree. Like Mauro. How did you met Mauro, right? You brought him in, or
I brought
something
him
that
in
way?
the first time. I met him through Walter in Feltre,
We're talking about
Italy.
Mauro Sternberger, right?
Mauro Sternberger.
Sternberger. Okay.
I met Marco Invernizzi in 2001 at the Ginkgo show.
Okay.
He was just fresh back from Japan, and he was the hot guy. He was the Italian stallion. And so we watched his program, and I got to meet him, and we became friends. So I started bringing him over and doing programs and all. He's a great stylist and everything. We became friends over the years. And when we got back from that first trip, we're looking at the pictures and of the demo trees, and it was Walter and I doing one tree that he had collected, and Mauro was doing a Mugo pine somebody else had collected. And we got back, and I'm looking at the pictures, and I said to Mary Kay, I said, there's like 2 times more pictures of Mauro than there are of your husband. I said, what's going on? So anyways, I got to know Mauro, but Marco. But Mauro, I met in Italy, and he took us to. He said, "Well, our town's castle's having an event for rugby for life." Mauro was a rugby player.
Professionally?
I think professionally.
Wow.
I know he was good.
Yeah.
And I saw pictures and everything of him, but he was just starting to retire from that and get more and more involved with bonsai. And he's an architect by education.
You say, yeah.
So anyways, we go to this fancy show. It was all you could drink champagne. It was like a 5-course dinner. There was entertainment. Everybody was dressed up, and Walter and I are in jeans and, a little jacket or something, but... anyways, we had a wonderful time together, and we slept at Mauro's mother's retreat that night, and we saw more of Mauro's trees the next day, and just hit it off. And I just casually mentioned, would you like to come to the United States sometime? And he said, I can leave tomorrow,
Oh, wow.
But yeah, he said, yeah, I would love to. So I brought him over here, and he's come, I think, about every year since that time. And so anyways, we've become friends over the years, and he teaches all through the country now. And
right, he's a hot commodity too.
He teaches on big trees a lot. That's his thing. And so he's been very good. I think he's getting a green card if he doesn't already have it now.
That'd be good. Yeah.
And Marco has his green card,
right.
So he can come and go.
Right. With your nursery, as I was able to come up, I think it was a year ago when I met Chase at the Woodstock program he holds, which was great for my experience and just overall knowledge base. And thank you for hosting those still.
Yeah.
How did you interpret this nursery as it started as a landscape nursery, correct?
Yes.
And then going from there, doing that, coming into bonsai. How did you conceive this notion of wanting to have it be, if I can say, a centrifuge for this explosion of getting people in, teaching people, and having these, big artists that hold a lot of credibility?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question with a long answer, but through people, you gain so much knowledge, and if you study under one person, you'll learn a lot if that teacher is the right person. But I was taught from the beginning through Chase that don't just study under one person. Go and seek out as many as you can, because each person is going to have their own insights and approach to any art form. And so you can learn techniques and how to wire properly and prune and all, but there's other things to it, bonsai, of course, than just that. And so the more people that I met, I saw the diversity in bonsai, and I had to seek out myself what I like for bonsai and my own style too. And I think my trees, a lot of them you can say Doyle designed that because of some aspect in the tree. And so anyways, Chase, I think, encouraged me early on to not just study under one person, but to go seek out. And, with Jennifer, she's a young woman, she's very talented. Her strengths are in design, and her and I had something in common through dance. She was a ballet dancer, and I was a jazz ballet for many years in tap. And so our love of dance brought us together also. And I see torsos in trees, and that was part of my art into bonsai. And I think Jennifer does too. She sees movement and everything, and this through dance and bonsai together. So anyways, I met a lot of women in bonsai, which I'm coming around to, that have affected my design. Kathy Shaner is one.
Yes.
Dory Froning. Lynn Perry Outstadt was, I think, one I could call her a mentor. I studied with her a lot, and I learned so much with her. Some women, there's many more, Mary Madison and so on. And so these women had their own special view of trees, and that if I would have just studied under one gender, I would have not had that.
Right.
And so, Jennifer, I'm either her mentor or teacher, whatever she wants to call me. Hopefully, first thing is friend.
Right.
But now with Jennifer, I'm learning from her. So, and awesome. Chase has said that to me. He says, I'm learning from you. I'm learning from a student. And so that's that turnover is, I think, the most rewarding part of me as a teacher. I think I want to be remembered as a teacher more than an artist or stylist or whatever.
Right.
Because you affect so many people, and so many people affected me. So I want to return that favor, so to speak.
Nice. I really appreciate that, because in the fact that there's a lot of people out there nowadays that just want instant fame, or so it seems. Yes. And I'm in the same boat with education, as you learn through doing, but also learning by giving, And in regards to how you approach it now, from your experience, with all these people, teachers and things, what keeps you going? I mean, because I get asked this a lot with, people just starting out, and I've only been in it for, 4, 5, 6 years now. And I was like, well, how do you get up, do these things? I'm like, well, I have to. It's just a part of me. What would you say to that? Yeah.
Well, the first thing is it's not money.
Right.
The second thing is my love of nature. The third thing is that my love of interaction with people. So it's a combination, but I enjoy it because every tree is a lesson. Every tree is, you have something of yourself in it. And whether you have that tree for a short period of time or you have it for 50 years, you're part of that tree. And it's quite rewarding. Back in 1970, I planted an oak tree near New Hope, Pennsylvania, for this nursery I worked at. And okay, so that's 52 years ago, and I go back there and see that tree. Now, the tree was a 2 to 2.5 inch trunk caliber then, and it is 2 to 2.5 feet trunk caliber now. So I looked at that tree grow. I watched that tree grow for all those years, and I get some kind of excitement in my heart when I go look at that tree and say, hey, I put that tree in the ground, and there it is today, and it's going to be there way past me, and it's just going to live for a long, long, long time, and nobody's going to care who put the tree in the ground, but somebody had to do it, and the old saying is, you should have planted trees 20 years ago for your own satisfaction, but now I still get excitement out of planting a tree that I won't enjoy, but somebody down the road will.
Your kids.
Kids and grandkids and so on. So that's what I wake up to every morning, and then I'm fortunate to have the choice of what I want to do that day. And if I want to prune and style a tree, wire a tree, unwire a tree, transplant a tree, redesign a tree, make a forest, I have that option because I'm blessed, having my own place to do that.
Do you think your education that you had within horticulture has helped you propel your knowledge even faster, even today still, with how it's changed? I mean, I'm doing horticulture at Ohio State, and from what I've read in textbooks, even 3 years ago, is different now. Would you say that adaptation of the knowledge gained, putting it into specific bonsai allocation now, it progressed you even faster?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend people to get more information on horticulture. That's the weak part of a lot of people. Some people are really good at taking care of trees and not styling. Some people are really good at styling and not taking care of trees. And I think my horticultural background, not only from the farm, but my formal education helped me in understanding a tree's growth, and also giving me the passion to know why that tree grows, and experimenting. And so I think it's aided me a lot with that. It probably held me back on some design work in the beginning. And when I was studying with Yuji, he came to me one day and he said, Jim, he said, stop reading books, stop thinking how this tree's going to grow in 5 years. He said, start looking at clouds. He said, go lay on your back on a cloudy day and just watch the clouds go by. Or go look at Japanese indigo prints and see how they are repetitive, but also how they're different. And he started giving me little homework assignments that weren't anything to do with bonsai, but they were everything to do with bonsai.
Right, out of the box thinking. Right?
That day turned a corner for me on tree design. And he was one to try, he was very classical, but he was also one to try different things. And that's what Chase also inspired in me. He said, try something different. You got this. You know how to do left, right, back, right, left, back, right, continuous taper,
the helmet,
so on.
Yeah.
And he said, you got that. Do something different. Do some, experiment. So this year's experiment is I'm taking 10 trees and going to put wire up through the trunk and into the ground. And I'm going to ground half the trees and see if there's any difference from the energy of the earth going through a wire into the roots and the trunk of the tree. And I got this idea from a friend of mine, Dr. Charles Palmer. He was the head of the NICU department at Penn State Medical Center, the hospital there. And he, over many years, grounded these newborn babies that are only a pound or so.
Right.
And he found that a large percentage of them responded in a positive manner of being grounded in the hospital the first few days of their life.
Oh, wow.
And so, anyways, we were talking. He said, well, why don't you do that with your trees? So my response was with a question, why not? So
right.
I'm going to do that experiment and just to see if it might make a difference.
That'll be interesting. Will you keep a log of things you notice?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to take photographs, weigh them.
Awesome.
They're not going to move. I'm not going to move them around. They're going to stay in one spot for 3 years.
Okay.
And see if I can
figure
anything out about
What is your theory or hypothesis as of right now? What do you think
My
might
theory
happen?
is that through energy in the ground, and of course when you put trees in the ground, they have a symbiotic energy with whatever comes into them. Insects, mycorrhiza, compaction, drainage, water, so many things, shading, sun. So many factors that involve them, but this is going to be a tree that's in a pot, just a nursery pot, out of the ground, and see if the root system will be better or worse. The top part, the green stuff and the branching, if that'll be better or worse from this grounding.
Will you apply styling to at all, or just let it grow freely?
It's going to grow.
Very cool.
They're pre-bonsai trees, but they're not going to be style. They're not going to be pruned, nothing like that. I want to just do a very basic fact-finding mission.
Within this approach of why not try something different, right? Is that how you approach your landscapes for your landscape company? As in the bonsai sense of, well, if that's miniature, how can I make that look like that but bigger?
Yeah.
Is that?
Oh, that's always, if you understand how to prune a bonsai tree, you can prune anything.
Yeah.
And so I've applied those techniques, those time-honored techniques of pruning ways to our landscapes, and that's where I think our landscapes are more distinctive than
Definitely
the average companies, and just our rock placement and our feel for aesthetics, and our customers have told us that many times over the last 49 years.
That's a great feeling.
It is.
One last question before, I know you got busy stuff, and I thank you for your time. What are some things that you want people to know about you in your practice as a person,
Well,
loaded question. I got a bunch.
I'm not one to spout about myself, but I always thought in my epitaph, and I'm going to be cremated, so I'm not going to have some
this big thing
rock with my name on it somewhere, taking up space. But I think if people would remember me by anything, it would be as a teacher, as I mentioned. I think I admire teachers more than most any person's profession in the world, because a teacher affects so many people, and if you're a good one, you have an impact on not just the person you're teaching, but the person that they will teach, and the person that person was taught to will teach,
the ripple
and
effect.
so on.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, what I would want to be remembered as. My goal in life has always been to enjoy other people's company, appreciate other people's abilities and inabilities too, and to always seek knowledge. I mean, seeking knowledge. If you stop seeking knowledge, where are you at? You just become stagnant.
Right.
And my family always taught me the value of work. And my grandmother died the day she was working the day she died. She was 100 years old, and she was a farmer.
Yeah.
She was working. And my grandfather, after he fell the pear tree, he was working until that time. And my uncle retired about 94, and my dad kept on working even after his real work ended and work for pay ended, he continued things. And they always taught, and my mother too. She was a nurse, but she always continued doing something for other people.
Right.
Until she passed away. So I think this is the value of life. I mean, if you stop, I'm going to retire at 65 and I'm going to sit around and find a hobby and
go fishing,
read the newspaper, and
yeah,
that's not for me. So
right. Let's keep them busy.
Always do something that hopefully it will be impacted by somebody else too.
I would say for me personally, and people that have been in our private study group in Columbus, or just even from the club, is that the education that you give has been impactful. So I will say that much.
Well, I appreciate that, and Rob
Hoffman,
and I have that conversation a lot.
Yeah.
And I think he's someone that's going to be up and coming. Definitely. As far as a teacher, and his enthusiasm shines through every time you talk to him. So I hope he finds what I've found at Bonsai.
Yeah, we're going to have a recording with him on too, to give him the light. Where can we find you? Where do you have a website?
Yeah, the commercial part, yes. We have Nature's Way Bonsai.com.
Okay.
And we're in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Again, this is ending our 49th year, starting our 50th. So
congratulations.
We're pretty excited about that. And we have 30-some classes lined up at our nursery. We have a studio, a yurt, and a large greenhouse where we teach out of, and sometimes outside too. So our classes aren't always in just one spot, and we're surrounded by nature, so that's also part of the classroom, is the woods and where we live. So invite everybody to come and see us someday if they're in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
But call first.
Yes.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much. Today's episode has been recorded, produced, and edited by Kevin Faris and Ryan Houston. Our music was provided by MIDI Cancer. To find more music from MIDI Cancer, check out their SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. To find more information on the podcast, please check out our Instagram page, Bonsai Time Podcast, and our website, bonsaitimepodcast.com. To stay in touch with us, Kevin's Instagram is Kevin_Faris, PNW, and Ryan's website is right2tree2.com. You can find these links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and